Neverwinter Nights is a top-down role-playing game that was produced by BioWare Entertainment in the year 2002. It is a game that is set in the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, based on Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition rules. The game engine was designed around an internet-based model for running a massively multiplayer online game, which would allow users to host game servers. This game was named after the original Neverwinter Nights online game, the first graphical, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, which operated from 1991 to 1997 on AOL. In this video, I am going to be reviewing the main campaign, which came with the game at release, titled The Wailing Death. Now, it's mindful to know that originally Neverwinter Nights was supposed to be simply a 3D toolset, where dungeon masters could create player-made modules of their own for other people to play together online. It was only with some backlash that the studio decided to devote some time to developing an official campaign for the game that could be played in both multiplayer or single player, as a showcase for what the game engine could actually do. Other features of the game included servers for creating persistent worlds, where players could use the engine tool set to develop their own mini multiplayer online worlds for others to enjoy. This innovative multiplayer functionality was the main selling point of the game, and the original campaign was clearly an afterthought. Because of this, on release, the main campaign met a lot of mixed reviews, as there was clearly not as much thought put into the role-playing element compared to other games that preceded, such as Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, and Planescape Torment, to name a few. Starting off, you are brought to a character select screen where you have to choose your gender, race, portrait, moral alignment, class, and your typical stats that you would see in any D&D game, such as strength, dexterity, wisdom, and so on. The one thing I enjoyed about the 3rd edition D&D is that it gives you a lot more customization options compared to the 2nd edition, which games like the Baldur's Gate series were based off from. You are able to more thoroughly customize each character with different skill points and feats, which allows for an unlimited amount of creativity and potential when crafting characters. You can also multi-class and open up prestige classes if you meet the skill requirements and prerequisite for your basic class. This is a strength that a lot of those early advanced Dungeons & Dragons games didn't have, and allows for more potential replayability. Given the way Neverwinter Nights is as a toolset, this is great. However, there are some limitations for this in the main campaign, at least as a single player, which we will touch on later. The campaign starts with you waking up in the barracks of Neverwinter Academy, in the city of Neverwinter. Upon leaving your bedroom, you meet Pavel, who will introduce you to the background of the game and set you on a quest of talking to different NPCs that will introduce you to different game mechanics. This is clearly a very immersion-breaking tutorial, as characters will tell you to click on this and click on that, and press I to open inventory and such. It is the kind of tutorial that after once, you'll start skipping all the dialogue windows as quickly as possible. This was my second time playing the game, so I skipped most of the self-explanatory jank until I completed my training. Now I have to enter the hall and attend my own graduation ceremony. When I arrive, I must speak with Erebeth de Tilmarand, Paladin and Defender of Neverwinter. After a brief conversation with her, we end up suddenly getting attacked by a group of mages.
take you! Mortano, Fortigiamo! Mortano, Fortigiamo!
Coincidentally, at the same time, goblins and skeletons attack the rest of the academy. When we defeat the mages, we are sent to protect the Waterdavian creatures, which are located in the stables in a different location of the academy. This is where the action of the game begins, and from here on out the tutorial becomes actually gameplay and not just reading a bunch of text in dialogue windows. We encounter Pavel again, who becomes our temporary henchman and introduces us to the henchman mechanic in the game. Here is where this original campaign shows one of its major downfalls. In previous D&D titles, you were able to have an entire party at your disposal, where you can manage each other's inventory and direct them and instruct them where to go. In the original campaign, you are only allowed to have one party member at a time, with limited functionality. There is no inventory, you cannot assign skills to them, or level their stats the way you want to. It's all done behind the scenes, and often the AI that controls them can be quite janky. You can position them close to the fight or behind you by engaging in dialogue with them, but you can't manually move them anywhere you want. This issue in the main game would be partially improved and fixed in the expansions, but was something completely absent here. When we get to the Door stables, the Waterdavian creatures are seen for a brief moment before escaping from their captors into the city.
In one brutal attack, the promise of those at the Academy had been all but snuffed out. Hope disappeared with the Waterdavian creatures, and the weight of the terrible sickness pressed down on the city once more. Even more chilling, the whispered rumors of enemies seeking to destroy Neverwinter from within had proved true, though the identity of those responsible for the slaughter was as yet unknown. Still, a flicker of hope yet remained, for not all had died in the attack. From the bloody carnage at the Academy, a survivor had stepped forward, a champion to carry the torch in this darkest hour.
Chapter 1 starts off inside the ancient Temple of Tyr. We speak with Fenthic, Erebeth's lover, and Dester, a very suspicious character.
I can spare no time for your idle chatter. I must coordinate the search of my Hellmites as they try, and this is in addition to all our other duties, tending to the dead, comforting the sick, spreading our blessings, and giving the people of Neverwinter hope.
And then we confront Erebeth. She sends us on a chapter-wide quest to discover the findings of the Waterdavian creatures and gather components for a cure to the Wailing Death, which is a plague that is ravaging the city of Neverwinter. The city is in complete disorder, with the city core being the only place with relative safety. In order to give our aid to the city of Neverwinter, we must resolve 4 different conflicts taking place in 4 different city districts. They each surprisingly have different problems, but all end up being generically similar, as we will see later. We are first pointed to explore the Peninsula District, where we encounter a bunch of rioting prisoners who are aggressive and attack us on sight. This time, the game introduces us to a lot of loot chests everywhere. In the streets and in random houses, it doesn't matter. There are tons and tons of chests to loot. Now, this by itself is not a bad thing, but a lot of the loot chests are locked, which means you either have to bring a henchman who can pick locks, which there are only 2 who have the capability of doing so, or you have enough strength you can simply smash the chests open. For the most part, I opted to smash them, as I had built a high-strength character, but after a while, this became quite tedious. However, both strategies of having your henchmen unlock or you smash a chest takes a lot of game time. This is where I found the main campaign to be at its most grindy. The process of opening chests probably accounts for a quarter of your gameplay, and while you can kind of ignore it, it can be a turnoff and has not aged well with modern gaming. Anyhow, we finally defeat a gang leader who drops us a key for us to be able to enter the prison sewers. After hacking our way through 4 levels of dungeons full of angry prisoners, we find and defeat the head jailer who has gone mad. When we kill him, we discover that an intellect devourer had taken control of his mind, one of the Waterdavian creatures. Once we kill it, we harvest its brain and report back to Erebeth. In the second district, the Beggar's Nest, we have to uncover a mystery of why zombies have flooded the streets, slaying everyone in their path, which finally leads us to a crypt where we have to fight a nasty dire spider, which at this level is quite difficult to defeat. But with the help of health potion spamming, we are finally able to defeat it. At last, we meet the Yuan-Ti who escaped during the battle at the academy. Once we kill her, we are able to harvest her heart, resolving the problems in the Beggar's Nest. Next, we enter the Docks district, where we fight a bunch of pirates. We figure out a way to enter the seedy tavern by finding 5 smugglers' coins off some of the enemies we killed. And then we enter. We descend into a basement where we kill a boss thug and find the feather of a cockatrice, one of the Waterdavian creatures. Lastly, I went to the Black Lake district, where I steal some more artifacts from wealthy estates and begin my last dungeon crawl of the main chapter by defeating some more thugs and confront a final boss mage, where I am able to free a dryad, who is another one of the Waterdavian creatures. But instead of needing to kill her, she volunteers to give me a lock of her hair, which is sufficient for the cure to be made. Finally, elements of all the different Waterdavian creatures return to the academy. We can move forward with the main story. I found this part of the campaign to be a bit lengthy and repetitive. The first chapter follows a very video gamey type of formula. Fight through the district with one specific enemy, find an item that opens up the main dungeon crawl your way to the final boss. While there are a few additional quests, as said before, that help bring a little variety, it's still a lot of fetch this and kill that, not to mention the henchman quests. After leveling up, you can talk to any henchman that you are partied up with, and he will give you this long backstory that has nothing to do with the main plot or story. Just very generic exposition that really has no relevance to the game whatsoever, except to explain each character's class prototype. For me, I just skipped through all the dialogue, but after a certain point, they will stop telling you their life story, and you will have to level up another level before they give you another boring exposition dump. Finally, after about 3 levels, they will request an item from you. While I hate all the exposition, this does add to the need to search every nook and cranny of the map to find every item that might be a valuable quest item. This part can really lengthen your time of the campaign, but the rewards can also be significant depending on what class you are playing. I was eager to get the Steam achievement for this, so I painstakingly completed every quest. Despite this, I found the henchmen to be rather boring and unhelpful during most of the game. They are quite squishy and would die easily, and I couldn't be bothered to teleport back to the temple or reload a save every time this happened. So I just learned to slug out most of the journey on my own, and if I needed to complete one of their quests, I merely hired them to talk, complete the quest, and move on. I found this to be a more efficient way to use my time. Anyhow, I was happy at this point to finally be moving on in my journey. After giving Erebeth the last cure reagent, we are invited to a ceremony where we observe how the cure is being created. This ends Chapter 1 and begins the epilogue to Chapter 1. We enter a chamber where we must meet with Erebeth, Lord Nasher of Neverwinter, Dester, and Fenthic. When we speak to them, Dester exposes himself as a traitor and a member of a mysterious cult. He snatches the cure and escapes to Helm's Hold, with Fenthic following behind.
What treachery is this?
You have no idea what you should just lay down and die. Dester, wait! Let me help you! Defend yourself!
We then must proceed to our castle, where we need to defeat Dester to get back the cure. We find Fenthic, who is sorry he blindly trusted Dester, as a good guy, but must pay the consequences of his choices. It turns out that Dester played a huge role in spreading the plague through Neverwinter, and both he and his unaware, well-meaning accomplice must pay for their crimes.
Dester's punishment was brutal, but his death brought little satisfaction. The horrors of the Wailing Death could not be undone with his execution. Those that had suffered now turned on each other. They looked for someone to blame, and found it in Dester's closest friend, Fenthic. The letter of the law found him negligent, and he was hanged as a sacrifice to appease the bloodthirsty mob. If any thought the sentence unjust, they remained silent. Duty required all to act as one. It was not the time for divided loyalties. The cult behind Dester's treachery still had to be found. The hunt led to the coastal town of Port Last. From here, the heroes of Neverwinter would continue the search for those behind the Wailing Death, and vengeance would be taken.
After the deaths of these two, we are sent to the town of Port Last, where we must find more information about this cult, known as the People of the Eye. Here is where we meet Aaron Gend.
Neverwinter has need of all her allies now, whether they serve for honor, duty, or gold. I have examined the reconnaissance reports of my operatives in the field, and the situation is grim indeed.
We are given 3 paths to explore: the North Road, East Road, and the South Road. This is where I actually began to enjoy the campaign a bit more. Gone are the stuffy city streets of Neverwinter, and now we have some open outdoor areas with grassland, farmland, and forest. In the second act, we still do see some rinse and repeat questing tropes, such as go to Orc Cave, kill Orc Chieftain, do the same with the bugbears, goblins, trolls, etc. But there are also a few memorable quests mixed in with the muck. I really enjoyed discovering the village of Charwood, where we are greeted by a person named Quint, who tells us about a slaughter that took place there. After defeating a cultist here, we enter a dungeon where we must discover evidence to figure out who was guilty of the murder of several children from this village. This was the first time where I felt like making a choice in this game mattered. Both accused brothers seemed to be guilty for different reasons, but then you also discover the ancient demon Belial, who is also behind the evil that occurred here. After piecing all the evidence, it is up to you as a player to determine their fate. The rest of the main story of the chapter plays out in the same way. Find the cult members and kill them. You will also be hunted by a few cult members who ambush you periodically. However, the variety of side quests here are a bit more robust. You have a repeat of the henchman quests, where you have to find an item for them, and as a reward they will upgrade the items they gave you in Chapter 1 to create a more powerful item. Then you have to recover 5 tomes, 3 gems, cure 5 werewolves, and take down 5 assassins. These are still tropey for sure, but I found the variety and exploration of this chapter to be much less tedious than what we got in Chapter 1. After we gather our evidence by tracking the cult, we conclude that the cult is based in the city of Luskan, to the north. When arriving there, we discover that Erebeth, our beloved paladin, has mysteriously disappeared. Through this epilogue, we take down 2 evil high captains who are running the city, Kurth and Bram. Bram is an evil child serial killer who is in charge of a bunch of were-rats and rogues. Kurth has also kidnapped one of the townsfolk's women, and is just as evil of a person. Either way, killing one of them will give us the token we need to access the main tower, where the cult is said to be hiding out. In this 9-level tower, we must explore each level with care to find stones that will unlock portals to the next level. On the 9th level, we meet Arkleen, the former Archmage, who has now become a Lich. We decide to free him by shattering each of the braziers around him. When we do this, we end up releasing 4 different Guardians. A Skeletal Devourer, a Greater Fire Elemental, a Bone Golem, and a Death Slod. This is where I feel the game really starts to get more varied in its choice of monsters and creatures to fight. As the game continues, the game likes to throw bigger and badder enemies from the monster manual at you, which also improves the enjoyment once you get beyond the first chapter. When we let Awe claim free, we are allowed to open the door to the top of the tower. Here, we encounter 3 important characters: Mogrim, the leader of the cult; Morag, leader of a lizard race; and Erebeth, our old accomplice.
You are welcome in my service, Paladin. I have awaited your arrival with great
Let the earth take you!
anticipation.
Do you renounce your false god of justice, Arabat de Tamaran? Do you renounce your god, your lord, and your people who have betrayed you?
I do.
Will you lead our glorious army in the name of your new mistress?
I will. I will lead them.
Then be the terrifying blackguard of our mistress Mora that you were meant to.
I shall. Neverwinter will fall before our might.
That it is of great importance that the other words of power be located. You must beware hatred, however, as she will... you have been lax, Mogrim. We have intruders.
We witness her become a blackguard, losing her status as a paladin, the once great defender of Neverwinter. This is where the lizard race makes their first big appearance, and where they become the major antagonist for the rest of the game. Overall, I really enjoyed this part of the game, despite its incredibly disjointed story. First, we were trying to cure a plague. Then, we were tracking down some cultists. And now, we are fighting a bunch of lizard people that want to take over the world. Video game tropes all the way through, I'm afraid.
Within the host tower of the Arcane, the enemy was finally revealed. Mogrim Korothir, madman, prophet, the one responsible for the Wailing Death. And with this revelation, a second betrayal. Erebeth, driven mad by her lover's execution, sought vengeance by joining Mogrim's cause. Together, they roused a fearsome army and prepared to descend upon Neverwinter. But an even greater evil threatened the city. The words of power, remnants of ancient magic long forgotten, were being sought by Mogrim's followers to bring devastation to the north. Neverwinter's champions were sent to the northern wastes of the Uthgard tribes to unearth these lost artifacts. For if Mogrim were to find the words of power first, the city of the north would surely fall.
In Chapter 3, we are sent to obtain these powerful artifacts called the Words of Power, which is apparently the only way we can fight back against this resurgence of lizard men and their cult followers. In this chapter, we are also given a quest from Lillian Cambridge to track down a snow globe. As I completed this chapter, I was careful to complete the next set of henchman quests to upgrade my items. We first go south, where we come up against these Uthgard barbarians that are invading Fort Ilkard, which is controlled by Neverwinter. After driving them back, I invade their home village and slaughter everyone, only to find that they are suffering from the plague because the commander Dallas gave them blankets infected with the disease. Had I known this was the case beforehand, I may have not been such a genocidal maniac. But it was here that my character shifted his alignment from neutral to evil, and I kind of decided to run with that. There is also a cool quest involving time travel, where we go to one of the Lizardmen creator ruins. Here, we are met with a bunch of indestructible golems. In order to get past them, we must talk to Saphira, who allows us to travel back in time within the dungeon. Through some persuasion, we convince the slaves constructing the golems to put defects in them so that we can defeat them when we make our journey back to the present. Being a Sith-wielding embodiment of death, I chose to convince them to put in a defect of slashing damage. It is in this chapter where dungeons become a lot more interesting and we are given puzzles to solve. This particular dungeon has 3 that we need to solve, that with some trial and error and wiki searching gets us to uncovering our first word of power after fighting face to face with a Balar Lord. This is when we meet Hadrillin and learn more about the Old Ones and the words of power.
These names mean nothing to me. Your cities are young. Your history but a single page in the accounts of the world. There is only one name that matters to me among your kind. Morgrim. Tell me, do you serve Morgrim?
For me, this harkens back to one of H.P. Lovecraft's short stories called The Doom of Sarnath, about an ancient lizard race that was wiped out by humans, and for thousands of years they were but a memory, until one day they rose again and drove the people of Sarnath away, never to be seen again. Next, we enter Moonwood, where we are attacked by some orc soldiers. After we defeat them, we take the road north. Here we run into a bunch of giants who are not too friendly with us either. We discover a cave infested with these giants and slaughter them all, including their chieftain. When we arrive back outside, we discover another cave where Ulcalatraxus, the green dragon, resides. When we show him the head of the chieftain giant, he is pleased with us and rewards us with a chunk of gold. Continuing down the path in Moonwood, we find ourselves at the spine of the world, where we discover a massive dungeon with tons of fire giants. As we progress forward, we discover that they are being led by an evil red dragon known as Cloth. He has been using his giants to steal the eggs of the other dragons and ingesting their essences to stay powerful. After slaying Cloth, we are able to uncover the second word of power. And finally, our last mission, we travel to Coldwood, where we track down Lillian's snow globe. We must make our way through the dungeon of the mage, Cyril Lyricus. Here, we continue to fight our way through different monsters and solve another gong puzzle before finally uncovering the snow globe after downing a huge fire elemental. Once we have the globe, we can return to Lillian. She reveals to us that this globe has its own magical ecosystem, and that there is a great chance that the third word of power that we seek is inside of it. We are shrunk down into this ecosystem, and we discover that this miniature world is at constant war with itself. Dwarves and dryads are constantly battling each other. When we enter the cave in the center of the world, we meet a giant white dragon and attack it on sight. After defeating it, we are rewarded with the last and final word of power. At this point, I had invested a lot of money in potions of every kind possible, and for the most part was able to heal spam my way through most of the enemies. The tricky part was facing monsters with stun, paralyze, and mind-altering capabilities. I found that the potions of clarity were incredibly important to me surviving magical encounters, until I found my armor of freedom, which allowed me to fight and move around without the fear of being stunned or paralyzed when engaging with the tough encounters. The first time I played through this, I was not so knowledgeable about this, and I had a much more difficult time. So finally, I've made it to Chapter 4, only to find that the city of Luskan, led by the traitor Erebeth, Margrim, and Lizard Queen Morag, have attacked Neverwinter and are seeking to reclaim the words of power that we have just obtained.
The words of power, the tools of a creator race. Hadriline spoke of them as though they could shape worlds, and perhaps they had. With these in hand, victory would not be far behind, or so it was thought. While Erin-Gend searched for the ancient relics, Morgrim's army pressed their attacks against Neverwinter. Their dark magics and sheer numbers soon overwhelmed the defenders. The betrayer, Erebeth, was at the forefront when the walls were breached. The words of power, once thought safe within Castle Never, were in danger of falling to the enemy. And behind the invasion, an even greater evil, Morag, Queen of the Old Ones, had awoken.
It is here where we must find a way to defeat these three antagonists. This brings us to battling and destroying the catapults that are laying siege to the city core, as well as some mages who are powering invincible golems, wreaking havoc everywhere. We find a secret passageway when we enter an old blind man's house that leads us to the back lines of the fight, where after defeating another Balor, we can pass through the portal which leads us to Margrim's sanctum. Here we confront our once friend, turned traitor, and defeat her once and for all. Next we come across Margrim and his servants. Now that we have the final word of power, we can use the Source Stone under Neverwinter to finally confront the evil queen and her race of old ones, once and for all. I first had to fight 2 dragons, one with a truly deadly knockdown ability. I had to reload a few times for this fight. Finally, after successfully being able to aggro the weaker dragon away from the second dragon, I was able to take them out one by one, with less difficulty, although the healing potions were certainly necessary for this.
Perish as you should!
For the last boss battle, I managed to spend all the rest of my money on as many potions of healing as I could, as this fight was really difficult. I remember on my first playthrough, I beelined a lot of the story, and I did not reap the benefits of armor that protected me from all the nasty stun spells, and the quest rewards from the henchmen. I struggled to beat the final boss even on the easiest level because I had only a handful of potions, limited money, and gear to mitigate the truly damaging effects of this final boss fight. But now, truly prepared, I was able to heal spam my way to victory with my helpful belt that mitigated negative spells and death spells, as well as my freedom armor that I mentioned before. Our friend Lizard portals us away to safety, and finally, we have become the hero of Neverwinter. This game was truly epic in its scope, and for the non-experienced CRPG player, it easily takes about 80 hours to complete. But, was it enjoyable? Were what all the critics said about the original campaign true? From my experience playing it, the criticism is certainly warranted. There were a lot of sections, but particularly in the beginning, where the game can drag on. At its core, this campaign is not here to tell an amazing story and revolutionize storytelling in gaming. It is very video gamey in its concept, through and through. The only really developed character is Arabeth, who at several times shows her two-dimensional side. She is angry at all of Neverwinter because they killed her lover, who was unintentionally caught up in a crime. Yeah, I get it, but I feel like there could have been some more depth in her character arc here. She goes from being really good to all of a sudden very evil just because of this tragedy. Again, it all just feels generic and put there to advance the game's plot. I say all of this criticism, and yet I still found a lot of parts of the game that were very enjoyable. The way this game is built, I often feel like I'm a D&D player moving across these 3D set pieces, always wondering what's around the next corner. With the exception of a lot of the big boss fights I found, the game was most enjoyable played from a third-person perspective, rather than a top-down perspective. This allowed me to give myself some more mystery about what might be around the next corner. Not sure what enemies I'll be facing, and in this sense, I got a lot of fun out of it. And despite the game's age, I found the Steam Workshop to be helpful when upgrading some of the graphical assets to make the game look a bit better. Are the graphics dated? Sure. And I think you do need to have a bit of an imagination while engaging with a game at times. But overall, I loved a lot of the dungeon crawls, especially the later ones. I would say that there are certainly particular builds you are going to want to play while completing this campaign solo. Some classes and builds might not be super viable, as you will be playing by yourself or with one henchman most of the time, so you will need to balance your character with that knowledge in mind. I recommend playing a high damage melee build with a high starting constitution stat, because you are going to get hit a lot in this campaign, and hit hard. The expansions and premium modules after this campaign offer some more depth and customization to this. So to save you from frustration, I recommend anything high damage and survivable. Thankfully, there are tons of different Neverwinter Nights builds online that you can browse from and choose from. Let's also not forget about the amazing music in this game and campaign. The music here was composed by none other than Jeremy Soule, the composer for the Elder Scrolls series and the Guild Wars series. And despite this being a lackluster journey at times, the music really does shine all the way through, especially from the second chapter onward. So in conclusion, would I recommend the original Campaign of Neverwinter Nights? Yes, but 1 or 2 playthroughs is sufficient enough for most people, and then I'd recommend exploring the expansions, followed by the premium modules and community-made stuff. As was stated at the beginning of the video, this game is not just a game. It's a platform for lots and lots of community content to explore. That's why on the Steam page, you will often see player reviews who have racked up thousands and thousands of hours of gameplay. Due to its player-made custom modules and persistent worlds feature, which many people are still running and updating, adding new content every year for the past 2 decades or so. So I definitely give this campaign a try. See you later, folks, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.